The biggest fantasy football gems come from the most ambiguous situations.
Let's break down 5 training camp battles that will have huge fantasy football implications, including one that could produce a true league winner. Let's go.
Welcome into the Lineup Fantasy Football Show. I'm Mitch Anderson.
I'm Justin Mello.
And Mello, when people think summer camp, they think toasting marshmallows and telling ghost stories. But when we think summer camp, we are thinking about our favorite players reporting back and kicking off the true fantasy football season. So let's break down some positional battles here between players ranked very closely together in ADP and point out who has the most upside and who has the most to lose. I'll let you kick it off first with, I think this is one of the most important, just like the ramifications of this training camp battle.
Yeah, I'm starting off with really what I think is the biggest quarterback battle, or the most ambiguous, where it doesn't feel like there's a true leader or a true favorite. And that's out of Atlanta. We have Tua Tagovailoa and Michael Penix.
Yep.
A true 50-50 in my mind, just a coin flip of who's going to end up starting.
Much like all of Tua's passes, a true 50-50 of which team's going to get it.
The color jersey, who's going to come up with it. Yeah, 100%. And things haven't been great for Michael Penix, which is why here we are in year 3 with him, even in a competition. So it might be the lesser of two evils. But with that said, there are a lot of implications. The first being probably the least exciting, but the most obvious, which is which one of these guys could be rosterable in your fantasy league. Obviously,
right.
Whoever doesn't get this job is just going to be off the radar in most formats. But to be honest, even the winner, I'm not really going to be drafting outside of maybe some super flex leagues. So I don't really care that much who wins this battle in terms of who I want at quarterback in fantasy. It's really the weapons. The weapons are going to be greatly impacted by this decision because there are really great weapons on this offense. So let's start with those guys. First off, Bijan Robinson, who I think will be much better if Tua gets the job. I've been kind of teetering back and forth all winter and spring, and now here in the summer, just teetering back and forth between Bijan and Gibbs for who I think should be the first running back off the board. I've changed my mind on the matter about as many times as Tua turned the ball over last year, which was a lot, like we mentioned earlier. But despite those turnovers and how much we like to clown on Tua, I do think he's the best thing for Bijan. And I think if he's named the starter, I would give Bijan the edge over Gibbs as the first running back off the board.
Yeah, I feel like that's like weirdly bold to say right now, but I'm actually with you. I think there's so much Gibbs hype that Bijan's getting slept on, especially if he has Tua throwing him the ball.
If Tua is throwing him the ball, I would lean that way because you look at the way Achane and Miami got used in the passing game with Tua over the last couple of years and how drastically Tua's ADOT has fallen in the last couple of years. And you compound that with the fact that Bijan is already an exceptional pass catcher, and he's already proven that, and he can be a high volume pass catcher out of the backfield. All of a sudden, Tua is the starter, and you're projecting 1 billion targets for Bijan in 2026, give or take a few, maybe only like 900 million, but you get what I'm saying. And on the contrary, I think London bodes better with Penix, who he's already produced elite numbers with. I've gone through these numbers on the show before, so I won't bore all of you with it again. I'll just give you the spark notes. Basically, Drake London has been dramatically better with Penix at quarterback than he was with Cousins, and pretty much every major statistic backs that up. So we already know he's been very good with Michael Penix, and Penix isn't afraid to push the ball downfield. That obviously bodes well for somebody like Drake London. So if Penix is named the starter, I'm excited for London. If Tua is, to be honest, with where London's currently being ranked and where he's currently going in drafts, I'm probably fading him. I just don't really trust Tua to support him. The really interesting one to me is Kyle Pitts, who, Mitch, I know you got a little kindergarten crush on your boy Kyle Pitts, even though I think he's a complete con artist, but we don't need to go there again. That's the one I'm most conflicted on. I don't really know how I'd change my view on him with this. I think I probably prefer Tua just because we've already seen Kyle Pitts really struggle with consistency with Penix already. He was better probably with Kirk Cousins. So at least we know he's not been very good with Penix, and maybe there's upside with Tua, but I don't know. I'm open to your thoughts on that one because I'm very conflicted.
I feel very strongly that it would be a better situation with Tua than it would be with Michael Penix. Like we've seen it the past few years. We saw it with Jonnu Smith. Like Tua is going to target the tight end position a lot. So for me, it's a huge bump for Kyle Pitts. I'm I think I'm high on Kyle Pitts no matter who the quarterback is, which shouldn't come as a shock to you. But I agree with you. I'm also the same thing with Bijan, where it's like, okay, if it's Michael Penix, he's still Bijan Robinson. I'm not that bothered by it. Drake London is the guy who gets affected, and I think is the most important and valuable fantasy football asset that's actually going to have their value determined by this training camp battle, more so than even if you're in a Superflex league rostering one of these guys. Like, it's Drake London that's getting affected the most here. And I think what we've seen with the deteriorating ADOT from two of the past few seasons, like you mentioned, like, it doesn't bode great for Drake London, whereas you've gone through it ad nauseum. Like, he performs extremely well with Michael Penix. So Drake London feels like he's sitting on a razor's edge right now for how we should value him. And at the current moment, I'm staying away. But if I start seeing that, like, Michael Penix is more healthy than we thought and that he's starting to win that training camp battle, because I think a lot of people are leaning the Tua side right now, I see that. I'm going to start scooping up Drake London before his value skyrockets.
Yeah, I haven't really. I've just been kind of like treading lightly before ever drafting London anywhere now, because I'm scared and I don't know who the starter is going to be. Like, I think it's a true coin flip between two not very good lefty quarterbacks, and it's a shame. Could you imagine if this offense had like even just a fringe top 10 quarterback under center? These weapons would all be going in the first couple rounds. I mean, they already are. Like, they already are. Another
guy to mention here, not as high on the list, but somebody that we're pretty high on is like Zachariah Branch. Like, if we get Tua under center, like,
Zachariah Branch might lead the NFL in targets behind the line of scrimmage if Tua ends up the starter.
Solely behind the line of scrimmage.
Yes, 100%. I mean, he did in college already.
Man, all right, before I get into my first training camp battle, if you guys are enjoying the content, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and also like the video. It helps us out so much. If you're listening to us on the Player Profiler feed, hit us up at the Lineup Fantasy Football Show. Mello, let's talk about my Lord and Savior, Parker Washington, and the guy he's battling at camp with, Brian Thomas Jr. I had to talk about this one, and it made me so happy that we were going over guys that were so close in ADP, and I go and check, and they are 2 spots apart right now. Brian Thomas Jr., wide receiver 31 in redraft. Parker Washington, the wide receiver 33. Their separation is a little bit different in Dynasty. The wide receiver 26 for BTJ and 34 for Parker. And I gotta say, trust tree here, this does not leave me, you, the comment section, anyone. I kind of hate how propped up Parker's getting right now.
Oh, boy. Oh, no,
When I
Mitch.
first started talking about him in January, he felt like our little secret here at the lineup, and now the hype's getting a little bit nuts, but I still think he's undervalued. I think the big story out of minicamp that we've seen this summer is how well Brian Thomas Jr. and Trevor Lawrence were connecting, and I have to admit, it gave me that little glimmer back in my eye, thinking about the same BTJ that was wide receiver 4 just 2 years ago. It feels like eons ago in his rookie season. And it's all kind of reminded me the potential's there. Obviously, last season was catastrophic, both from a statistical perspective. He finished as the wide receiver 44, and you probably drafted him in the second round. But also from an optics perspective, we had the bad drops, we had the bad body language. And so it's made it all the more difficult for Brian Thomas Jr. managers seeing Parker Washington kind of explode onto the scene last season and all of a sudden start getting all of this traction this offseason as everyone's fantasy darling. Like, last season, I feel like people thought Parker Washington was just kind of good in the last few weeks. He was the wide receiver 16 from week 9 on after their bye week. He has also, I've mentioned this a million times, he led the team with 114 targets. He finished 9th in the entire NFL in Pro Football Focus's receiving grade. And so now the question is, who's the real wide receiver 1 in this high-powered Liam Cohen-led Jaguars offense? I can tell you one thing, if we knew who the true wide receiver 1 was, we would not be drafting them as the wide receiver 33 and 31 off the board. They would be going a hell of a lot higher. So that is what we are trying to look for here in this battle. And I think a lot of people right now are speculating that the Brian Thomas Jr. hype that came out of minicamp was fluff to raise his trade value or a negotiating tactic against Parker Washington as he looks to get an extension. But to me, I think we're not really going to know the truth until that first day of training camp truly hits and we start to get a clearer picture of who Trevor Lawrence is actually connecting with and who his favorite target is. Once we do, I think you're going to start seeing these guys separate a little bit more. If it really does lean Parker Washington, you're going to see this flip, and you're going to finally see Parker Washington being drafted as the wide receiver 1. But if this Brian Thomas Jr. hype starts growing and it's actually becoming more and more of a real thing getting closer to preseason, you're going to see that separation build, and all of a sudden Parker Washington might be a value again. Brian Thomas might start getting propped up again, and everyone who had him last year is going to get terrified.
I think my takeaway from all of this has been to just draft Jacoby Myers. I know I mentioned that on a recent episode.
You're such a Jacoby Myers fan.
Early, I'm talking like early offseason when I was a sicko monitoring, ECR and ADP. He was actually higher than both of those two guys. He's lower than both now in most places you look, not everywhere.
You know what's really interesting? A result of this that I didn't even consider is that both of these guys get insane hype out of camp, and no one's talking about Jacoby Myers, and Jacoby Myers becomes an insane steal later on in the summer.
I think he will be. He's just always the same. I just think his role in this offense is the safest. But with that said, I don't think he has a path to a top 12 finish that I think Brian Thomas does, because he's done it. And to be honest, I do think Parker Washington can do it. I know you love him.
Okay, I was like, you better say that.
I think it is totally possible. What I'm most interested to see in camp is who's out there in 2 wide receiver sets consistently, because we know all 3 are going to be on the field in 3 wide receiver sets. Travis Hunter probably will get mixed in 2, but it predominantly will be those other 3 guys we mentioned. And why I think that could be really important to monitor, especially, is we've seen in recent years, I think Sean McVay kind of led the charge. Sean McVay was always a 3 wide receiver guy, and now he's the 2 tight end, 2 receiver guy. And the league's kind of like pigtailed off that. And you even saw this year in the draft, James Gladstone, that's our GM, right? James Gladstone?
Yeah, James Gladstone.
He talked about it. They drafted a blocking tight end in the 2nd round, and people were surprised by it. And he answered very candidly saying, we're seeing this trend like going into heavier packages on the field, more tight ends on the field. We want to be equipped for that. If the Jags start shifting to more heavy personnel and you're only going to have 2 receivers on the field at a time more often than we saw last year, it's really important who's on the field in those sets. So that is something to really watch in camp.
Yeah, 100%. I love how we call it a copycat league when really it's just a copy Sean McVay league.
Yeah, it's copy Sean McVay, who, by the way, little aside, absolutely yoked. I don't know if we've addressed that yet on this show, but if we haven't, it needs to be mentioned.
I feel like that's not even new news, but yes, I do know the picture you're talking about in these Jags.
Oh my God. He looks like white Aaron Donald.
Just to wrap that all in a bow, though, watch the Parker Washington and Brian Thomas stuff. A side quest here, if you want to, is try to monitor what's going on with Travis Hunter. I mean, we're getting more reports now that him playing mainly defense is going to be the standard moving forward, but also watch that Jacoby Myers price, because not only, Mello, do we know that what his role is going to be in Jacksonville, because we know what his role is going to be, there's not going to be all that much hype around him, and no one's going to be talking about Jacoby Myers, and that's the exact type of guy that kind of just slips in your drafts, and you end up getting a steal.
Yeah, he'll be going as like the wide receiver 40 in drafts and finishes the wide receiver 19. And it's like, he's not like a crazy league winner, but he's a guy who's absolutely going to return on that value, on that ADP. We
got to do another boring players episode and just talk about Jacoby Myers for like an hour.
Yeah, he's the king of the boring players. All right, well, we've gone through quarterbacks here. We've gone through receivers. I got a running back battle for you that I'm really eager to see how it shakes out. And that is Rachaad White and Jacory Croskey-Merritt, a.k.a. Bill. And we can throw in Katron Allen too, the rookie. I'm not as convinced he's really part of this competition, but we'll throw his name in there. This competition is super interesting to me because this is an offense that I think a lot of people, especially you and me, Mitch, we're really projecting a bounce back. We're projecting this offense to be closer to the 2024 version of itself than the version last year, especially if Jaden Daniels can stay healthy. So the running back on this offense could end up being a really nice piece, one that could really help your fantasy team. And both of these guys, White and Bill, are both super cheap right now. They have a Fantasy Pros ECR of running back 38 and 39 respectively. Very similar range in ADP as well. Yep, late 30s, early 40s. So very affordable. Katron Allen, running back 67. So he's like dirt cheap. And I'll start up by saying I think this is likely going to be some sort of committee.
I agree.
And I use that lightly. Like, I don't know, it's kind of ambiguous what counts as a committee, what counts as a starter versus, a change of pace back. But I'd be pretty surprised to see anyone be a true bell cow, I guess is what I'm trying to say. with that said, I think it'll be critical to monitor how these backs are being used in camp, because I've been all aboard the Rachaad White bandwagon. I've been drafting him a ton. I've been talking very positively about what he can do in this offense. Some haters of Rachaad White have been quick to point out the fact that he looks slow, which to a certain extent is fair, but to be honest, I think at this point has gotten a bit out of control. People are acting like he's me out there trying to play dizzy bat after 12 Bud Lights. It's not that bad. Like, he's put some good stuff on tape. He was actually PFF's 12th highest graded running back last season without any qualifiers or anything like that. So
yeah, he's so many people just commented. They're like, yeah, but you're forgetting Rachaad White's bad. And it's like, well, the metrics don't back that up at all.
Especially with Bucky hurt last year, early in the year, like Rachaad White was winning people fantasy weeks. Like, he was productive. But I mean, I get to a certain extent, like I just admitted I don't think he'll be a bell cow. And I do think his skill set lends itself more to being a pass catching third down back, definitely more so than Jacory Croskey-Merritt.
Yeah.
But I will admit his value will be severely limited if that is all he does, because I don't think Jaden Daniels is going to be checking the ball down a ton. It's just not something he really does. He pushes the ball downfield. He takes off and he runs. We love that mobility. So Rachaad White's probably going to have to get a good portion of the early down work to really return on ADP, but I definitely think it's possible. And we'll learn more once we go into camp, because if Rachaad White is consistently working with the ones, I will be putting a hole in my phone screen from spamming the Rachaad White button in all my drafts. Like, I'm going to need like 7 new
Call the
phones
Geek Squad.
Do they still exist?
I don't know. Does Best Buy still exist?
I don't know, man. I don't like going shopping. It gives me anxiety. But if we go into camp and Bill's getting the early down work, if he's getting it in August, there's a good chance he's getting it in September too, which, by the way, I will admit, as somebody who's out on Bill, it would be very funny if he ends up being a league winner the year after. We all thought he was going to break fantasy leagues and solve world hunger and do all these great things. But we'll see in camp. Like, camp is going to be very telling, not only who looks good, but who's actually getting used in certain personnel packages. And then who knows, like, we talk about these two, and then a Katron Allen, who I keep talking about as sort of this distant third piece. I have my doubts about him severely, but he could just go sicko mode in camp and all of a sudden his draft stock goes through the roof. So let's pay attention to all that. For me, it's one of the most important and interesting camp battles to watch.
I'm going to say this. I might regret saying this, but like, I kind of feel like no matter what hype comes out about Katron Allen, I think I'm just out. I just don't think that there's a path to him having like meaningful fantasy value other than
he could be Bill.
Yeah, right. No, 100%. It's this depth chart that is on the surface fragile, and everyone gets excited because you can grab a running back super late, which we've had so many conversations about this when we're drafting best ball together of like, there truly is a running back cliff this year. And I think we're all trying to convince ourselves that like, oh, well, maybe I could get something out of Nicholas Singleton or Katron Allen, or, I mean, we're talking Damon Claiborne and we'll always stick by our guy Damon, but like,
shout out Damon.
In a lot of ways, I think we're all kind of kidding ourselves into thinking that some of these guys are going to come in and, or Emmett Johnson even, like, are going to get meaningful work, where I think this battle is truly between Rachaad White and Jacory Croskey-Merritt. And you bring up a good point. I think a lot of people are emotionally burned by Bill, and so they want to completely write him off. And that's me playing the devil's advocate as someone who loves Rachaad White and thinks that he is going to be the guy and the worthwhile fantasy asset here. I just want to go into this with a clear mind and like try to avoid the biases as much as I can and just say like, yeah, I think this is completely up for grabs. And I agree with you. If we start seeing that Rachaad White is really just working in on third downs, I'm probably staying away at a running back, 38 price tag right now. It's a little rich for my blood.
Yeah, same. As someone who's drafting a ton of him, same. If he's only working in on third downs, it's like, all right, well, that won't be a very, very valuable role in a Jaden Daniels offense. But now, I agree.
If he's out there all the time, then I want every possible share of him at this price.
If he's getting the majority, not even all, but the majority of the early down work, he is going to be such a steal and a league winner. I need to keep in mind, you raised a good point though. Like, I don't want to have my biases because I want Rachaad White because I've been drafting him. We need like the Men in Black little thing that they flash and you forget. I need that in my grill right before I watch Commanders camp, and then I can make a good decision.
1000%. I need the Men in Black flash before I watch any training camp stuff. And there's no better segue into a guy I've had priors about that I now need to be completely unbiased going into watching. And that's Rome Odunze as he battles it out with Luther Burden at the Chicago Bears training camp. Luther Burden, right now, the wide receiver 21 in redraft, wide receiver 17 in Dynasty. Rome Odunze, the wide receiver 30 in redraft, and the wide receiver 20 in Dynasty. It's been a minute since we talked about these guys, Mello. I think the last time was during our Dynasty Sells episode with Corey from Fantasy Stock Exchange, where we discussed that we were all out on Luther Burden at cost. I was extremely high on Rome Odunze based on the fact that he was the wide receiver 3 overall through 4 weeks before sustaining a stress fracture in his foot. Ends up playing through most of the season hurt, multiple wide receiver 1 finishes with that stress fracture, and then ends up taking off the end of the year from weeks 14 to 18. Plus the fact that Luther Burden had finished outside of the top 24 receivers in all but 2 games last year and finished as the wide receiver 48. All that being said, Mello, a lot of things have changed since the last time we talked about these guys, and the elephant in the room would like to be addressed. And there's 2 elephants in the room. The first one is Rome Odunze, who came out recently and said about that foot with the stress fracture, quote, "This is my new normal. And it's not from a standpoint that I'm always in pain, but the way my foot broke, there's calluses in there and they create a different type of foot structure with those bones." That's always good. Different types of things that kind of shift things around. So my new normal is kind of what I'm going into.
Not good.
Don't love that.
Not good.
Anytime I'm talking about a new normal with my body is very bad. It's like the first time I tried to eat a whole Domino's pizza post-college and I had to tap out after like 5 slices. And I'll be honest here, you never really get back to 8. And it's my new normal. So I'm terrified about Rome Odunze's outlook right now. Meanwhile, Ben Johnson's coming out and he's saying he's buying Luther Burden's stock for the year. And this could always be coach speak, trying to fire up a young guy that he wants more out of. But I think the fact that he's saying that about Luther Burden and none of these other guys in this offense, it tells me a lot. And I don't think Ben Johnson's fully a guy that just talks out of his ass. So to break all that down, what are we actually watching for here at camp? First off, I want to see what Rome Odunze actually looks like running. How's he getting out of his breaks? Does he seem like he's up to speed, or does there actually seem like there's something hampering him? And then I also want to see if the Luther Burden coach speak is translating into him getting real opportunities and making plays out there, or if this is all just internet Twitter hype that we're doing in the middle of June and July.
The fantasy community just hyping up players irrationally? When have we ever done that, Mitch?
I know. It's a new thing we're trying this offseason.
I think I'm glad. I know we're way past due with those Ben Johnson comments, but I'm glad we're finally talking about them because it's certainly not a bad thing for Luther Burden that Ben Johnson is saying that.
Of course not.
It's definitely not bad, but I do think it's been blown out of proportion. Ben Johnson's brain doesn't think about fantasy rankings and where guys are being drafted and the fact that Luther Burden is going above Rome Odunze. He doesn't give a shit. He's thinking about the fact that you have the second-year receiver that was playing behind Olamide Zaccheaus for the vast majority of his rookie year. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, he's going to have a big role in this offense. We're going to need him to step up and do more than a couple of boom games down the final few weeks of the season. That's the lens that Ben Johnson is talking about. And of course, he's not going to say he's not excited about his second-year guy.
Are we entirely sure that Ben Johnson doesn't have Luther Burden on his dynasty team and he's trying to prop up his stock?
There's always a chance that you see who is the play caller recently? Who is the play caller recently who said he's playing a lot of Madden to prep for his offensive play calling duties? You never know what these guys are doing. You never know.
He's going to be so confused when someone doesn't run through the defender, literally glitch through them. He's like, that usually works.
Yeah, what the hell is that?
Why hasn't 4 verts worked yet this game?
I want somebody to actually. I think they invented this. I'm getting off the rails here. I think they invented a fan vote play calling league that didn't work. It lasted one season.
Comment if you remember it. Comment what that league was called.
Yeah, I want to know what that league is called. Long story short, though, I still like the value of Rome. His foot terrifies me, and camp will hopefully give us a lot of answers.
That's a classic Rex Ryan quote. The feet terrifying him.
I think Rex Ryan has said the opposite.
Actually, he hasn't found a foot he hasn't liked.
No. Bunions and all. All right. Oh, we ready for our favorite battle here, Mitch?
Yeah, that's a great transition from Bunions into these two guys.
Bunions into the running back competition in Carolina between Chuba Hubbard and Jonathon Brooks.
Oh, I love this one.
This one gets me so hot. I'm ready to run through a freaking wall, Mitch, just talking about this battle here. As a Jonathon Brooks believer, I may start doing victory laps as soon as Brooks even gets a single snap with the starters in camp. Like the first rep he gets. Yeah, stop the count. It's over. This one's really interesting to pay attention to, though, because just a few months ago, Chuba was the clear starter, and Brooks was just, at best, like a sneaky sleeper dark horse to keep an eye on, which is when I started really being interested and thinking he had a chance to surprise a lot of people. But now, all of a sudden, this is being treated as a true competition, where Chuba's still the favorite, for sure, but people are acknowledging the fact that Jonathon Brooks could have a real shot at this job. And I want to level set and just like manage expectations here by clarifying, barring injuries, Chuba Hubbard is going to get the vast majority of the work with the starters in camp. Now, whether that carries into the season, I don't know. In camp, Chuba is going to be working with the starters a ton. It's basically a lock. So let's go over what we really should be looking for in Panthers camp. One is, how much is Brooks worked in with the starters? If it's just a little bit, then Chuba may have a pretty strong grip on this job. But if Brooks is working in a lot, even if it's less than 50%, all of a sudden, to me, that indicates the staff is telling us that Chuba doesn't really have a clear, easy path to being the bell cow of this offense, and his grip is weakening substantially on this job.
Yeah.
The second thing I'm looking for is, how healthy and explosive does Brooks look? Obviously, it's the torn ACLs that have derailed his career. All went well in OTAs, but we need to see how everything looks once they rev up in camp and the pads are fully on. Is he cutting well? Is his burst fully back? Does he look good in shorts? Those are all the important questions us analysts need answers to in order to know if he's fully back. And then the last thing, of course, is, how does Chuba look? Because he's been painfully inconsistent throughout his career. Part of that may be because of injuries like the calf last year, which allegedly is the reason he wasn't very good. If he looks great in camp, maybe last year was just like an injury fluke, and maybe he is a really good running back and worthy of this starting gig. But if he just kind of looks meh, maybe he doesn't really have it, and maybe the door is wide open for Brooks. So those are all the things I'm going to be paying attention to, because they're all going to be baked into my final valuations before I'm drafting for serious leagues in August.
Yeah, this one is so interesting to me. I think it's the perfect battle for our top spot, because I think we are just going to glean so much information from this. I think we need so much information on what these two guys look like. And we're looking at two guys who are coming off of injury. If you don't think that what happened to Chuba last year was because of injury, then you're basically just saying you don't think he's very good. Right. So we've got Brooks, who's got the high draft capital, potentially the best running back in his class when he got drafted, but we haven't seen him play at the NFL level because of the injuries. But he's 23 years old, and I think that's the thing that keeps standing out to me. And then there's Chuba, who I personally was incredibly high on last year. He was probably one of my biggest misses of the year, if I'm being transparent. And like you said, he's been painfully inconsistent, but to his defense, he was hurt a lot of last year. And so when things are good, they're good with Chuba. That being said, do you feel like there's a little part of Canales and this whole coaching staff that's like, Rico Dowdle was kind of really, really good when he was in this offense last year. And even when Chuba's been healthy, he hasn't been that good. So there has to be some level of them that, no matter what they've been saying in the media, is willing to let Jonathon Brooks get a handle on this job if he looks good enough in camp. And so I think this is a very genuine battle, more than a lot of people want to admit. And I think things could turn very, very quickly on the onset of training camp if we're seeing Brooks look really good and getting the majority of the work.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the fact that Dowdle's out of town too, and Derek Brown brought this up when he was on. Like, teams will tell you without telling you the way they view players, and they let Rico Dowdle go. And honestly, he didn't even get paid that much. I mean, he got a nice little bag, but I mean, he didn't, like, the Steelers didn't have to reach super deep in their pockets. The Panthers probably could have afforded to bring him back. And you know what the Panthers did do to bring in new talent? Basically nothing. Like, they brought in the ghost of Quadzilla, AJ Dillon. That's it. Like, that tells me that they have confidence if nothing else, in Jonathon Brooks being a part of this offense. Now, whether it's the major part of this backfield or not, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, at his price earlier on in the summer, it was the type of thing where you could take a shot on him and just be like, at this price, it's fine if he's the RB2 and he just gets a decent amount of work. And now he's gotten into the territory where it's like, you're kind of picking one or the other here. And one of these guys is going to have to get a lot of work to make it worth the price.
I still am a Brooks guy, but I'm sad to admit he's no longer one of my favorite values because he is shooting up everybody's draft boards right now.
Those were our 5 biggest training camp battles to watch for fantasy football here in 2026. If there are any other positional battles that you think we need to talk about in the future before the season starts, let us know down below. If there are any guys you are super excited about that you want us to talk about on the show, also leave it down below. Mello, before we get out of here, do we miss anything?
Nothing from me.
All right, we'll catch you guys next episode.